We usually map a war by looking at the front lines, the trenches, troop movements, those red and blue shaded areas on a map.
Right, the traditional view of a conflict.
Exactly. But if you look at the state of Europe right now, especially over this, crucial 2-week window we're in from late June to early July 2026.
The most critical battles aren't happening anywhere near those painted borders.
No, they're not. They are happening hundreds of miles behind them, in oil depots, inside cyber networks, and, well, even in the boardrooms of defense contractors.
Yeah, we are witnessing a fundamental shift in how global power is tested and sustained.
And that shift, that invisible architecture, that's our focus today. Good morning and welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack the escalating dynamics between NATO, Ukraine, and Russia, and really trying to decode exactly what global decision makers are planning next.
Right, and trying to do that impartially, just looking at the data.
Exactly. And before we jump in, a quick note that today's deep dive is sponsored by ProWave AI and generated using Stylo News. That's an AI-powered intelligence application.
Which is pretty cool because Stylo News is actually the consumer version of Stylo Intel Ops, the enterprise software used by government, military, and corporate operations.
Yeah, so that means the synthesis we are unpacking for you today is built on the exact same intelligence tooling used by global leaders.
It's giving you direct access to that high-level operational picture.
Exactly. So the title of today's deep dive is NATO Signals Resolve as Ukraine Escalates Deep Strikes. We are focused on the European region with data current as of July 13th, 2026.
And, to really understand the political maneuvers happening in capital cities right now, we have to start with the brutal physics of the battlefield in Ukraine.
The reality on the ground.
Right. Because over the past 2 weeks, it's been defined by this massive imbalance in attritional capacity.
What does that mean in practical terms, though?
Well, Russian forces are maintaining a heavy, relentless push across multiple axes. Specifically in the Donetsk sector, they're creeping toward key logistics hubs like Pokrovsk.
Just a grinding advance.
Yeah, and a purely conventional artillery duel, like a slugfest of infantry and shells, the math simply favors the larger population and the deeper ammunition reserves.
Right, and Ukraine recognizes that fighting solely on those terms, well, it's strategically suicidal in the long run.
Exactly. So they are changing the geometry of the battlefield. The intelligence briefs we're looking at call it a tactical offset.
Right, because instead of just throwing bodies at the Russian advance in Donetsk, Ukraine is reaching deep into Russian sovereign territory.
They are systematically hunting the logistics network that actually feeds that frontline artillery.
I mean, we're looking at verified strikes on the Tver oil depot, major Lukoil-linked facilities, and critical intelligence infrastructure.
Yeah, and let's trace the mechanism of that strategy for a second. When a drone strikes an oil depot in Tver, it doesn't just destroy a tank of diesel.
It forces the entire network to adapt, right?
Exactly. Trains have to be rerouted. Fuel trucks have to drive further. The timing of supply deliveries gets thrown completely off.
Which means a disrupted rail network results in artillery shells arriving at the Donetsk front, 3 days late.
Right. By attacking the deep rear, Ukraine is essentially starving the front line of the momentum it needs to advance.
And the targets are incredibly varied, too. I mean, they hit the Glazivka air defense radar installations in Crimea.
Yeah.
They are hunting shadow fleet vessels in the Sea of Azov. There's even a verified report of a Ukrainian strike taking out a Russian Su-35 fighter jet right on the tarmac.
Which is a huge blow. But the Russian response has been equally severe, focusing on punitive, asymmetric retaliation.
Strikes on cities.
Yes. We have seen intense, repeated missile and drone strikes on Kyiv, aiming to break civilian morale and overwhelm their air defenses.
But the most alarming data points, at least in this recent window, center on the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, or ZAP, in Enerhodar.
That situation is incredibly tense.
Yeah, the sources detail heavy strikes around the perimeter of that facility, resulting in civilian casualties, including at least 6 reported deaths.
And it got to the point where the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, had to immediately intervene over severe nuclear safety fears.
Right. And let's just pause on the strategy here, because pushing the fight this deep into Russian territory feels incredibly precarious.
So.
Well, if Ukraine is systematically destroying radar arrays and oil infrastructure deep inside Russia, Moscow has to react, right?
Right.
It feels like poking a bear that's already caught in a trap.
That's a good analogy.
I mean, it might not be able to charge forward, but it will thrash around dangerously. If the Kremlin cannot advance quickly on the front line because their logistics are burning, they're going to act unpredictably.
And the Kremlin's rhetoric reflects that exact corner dynamic right now. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov has officially dropped the term special military operation.
Wow, really?
Yeah, he is now explicitly calling it a full-scale war and framing Ukraine's deep strikes as Western-backed terrorism.
So Ukraine is navigating a very dangerous paradox here.
Right. The deep strikes are highly successful at degrading the Russian war machine and improving Ukraine's leverage for eventual peace negotiations.
But the more successful they are at degrading those supply lines, the more they incentivize Moscow to escalate in ways that bypass the conventional battlefield entirely.
Exactly. Because Russia has committed the vast majority of its conventional military capacity to Ukraine, its tanks, infantry, artillery, they simply do not have the bandwidth to open a traditional, conventional second front against NATO.
Which tracks with the Stylo Intel ops estimates from early July. They consistently rate a deliberate Russian ground invasion of Poland or the Baltic states as unlikely.
Right. The troop concentrations required for that just do not exist right now.
But that doesn't mean the threat to NATO is low. It just means that the threat has changed shape.
Exactly. The risk of deniable sub-threshold provocations is rated as highly elevated. Russia is heavily pivoting to hybrid warfare.
And hybrid warfare is really designed to target the legal and political mechanisms of an alliance, isn't it?
Yes, specifically NATO's Article 5. That's the principle that an attack on one member is an attack on all.
The ultimate tripwire.
Right. You can think of Article 5 as a digital switch. It requires a clear binary yes or no on whether an act of war occurred. Sub-threshold warfare is engineered to keep that switch jammed right in the middle.
Just exploiting ambiguity. And the intelligence reports show exactly how this plays out in reality.
What are they seeing on the ground?
Well, Polish intelligence is tracking little green men, basically unmarked operatives conducting surveillance.
Right.
We're seeing physical sabotage on Polish rail lines, massive spikes in GPS jamming across the region, and highly targeted cyber attacks.
And it's not just the eastern flank. In northern Europe, a Russian spy aircraft recently dropped a sonar device into the water near a UK aircraft carrier in the Norwegian Sea.
This casual intimidation.
Yeah, and simultaneously, there is a sustained Russian drone campaign designed to map the gaps in NATO's air defense networks over the Baltic and Nordic regions.
How does it work exactly? Mapping the gaps.
Well, the mechanism here is to fly a deniable drone near restricted airspace, forcing NATO radars to light up.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, once the radar turns on, Russian signals intelligence triangulates the blind spots. They're probing the fences.
And I think we need to bring this back to you, the listener, for a second. Think about the ripple effects of this gray zone warfare on a normal Tuesday.
It's not just a military problem.
Exactly. If a cyber attack hits a logistics hub in Warsaw, it doesn't just stop military shipments. It spikes the insurance premiums on the commercial shipping lanes that bring goods to grocery stores across Europe.
And if GPS is jammed over the Baltic Sea, commercial flights are delayed, supply chains stutter, and economic friction just increases across the board.
Right. And by the time NATO lawyers and politicians debate whether a mysterious fire at a warehouse or a drone crashing in a field actually constitutes an Article 5 trigger.
The news cycle has already moved on.
Exactly. The damage is done, and the public feels unsafe. The goal is to create fear, disrupt daily life, and paralyze the political consensus required to retaliate.
Which brings us to a major inflection point. The pressure of this hybrid threat, colliding with Ukraine's desperate need for more air defense, forced NATO's hand.
Yeah, this takes us to the NATO summit in Ankara, Turkey, which took place on July 7th and 8th, 2026.
The alliance had to address these air defense blind spots immediately. They announced a $40 billion investment specifically targeted at anti-drone technology over the next 5 years.
That is a massive financial commitment.
It is, and it's alongside the joint procurement of Saab Global surveillance aircraft.
The Saab Global is actually a perfect example of changing the geometry of defense.
Right, because ground-based radars struggle with low-flying drones.
Right, because of the curvature of the Earth and the terrain masking them. But putting the radar on a plane at 30,000 feet looking down essentially turns the entire Baltic Sea into a glass floor.
There is nowhere for a drone to hide.
Exactly. But, the hardware is only half the story here. The intelligence briefs lay out the contrasting priorities of the key decision makers at this summit.
And we are presenting these perspectives neutrally, just looking at them as data points that will shape the next 6 months of policy.
Right. So let's start with the U.S. posture driven by President Donald Trump. His focus is heavily on burden sharing.
Yeah, the administration is demanding that NATO members not only hit, but exceed their defense spending targets. They're pushing the financial weight of European security back onto Europe.
Notably, the U.S. is also rejecting any new sanctions on Russia at this time.
That's a key data point. But arguably, the most consequential outcome of Trump's meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky was the decision to officially license Ukraine to produce Patriot missile systems domestically.
And I have to question this a bit, because isn't licensing them to build Patriots like giving someone a recipe instead of baking them a cake?
That's a very fair point.
I mean, how long does that recipe take to cook when they need the defense right now?
Well, building a Patriot missile system requires complex metallurgy, advanced microelectronics, and a highly specialized supply chain. It will take years to build that capacity on Ukrainian soil.
So it doesn't solve the air defense crisis happening over Kyiv today.
No, it doesn't. But strategically, it signals a massive shift from providing emergency aid packages to integrating Ukraine into the permanent European military-industrial base.
Ah, so it is a long-term play for strategic autonomy.
Exactly. It changes the long-term calculus for Russia.
Now, for President Zelensky, the focus definitely remains on immediacy and leverage.
Naturally.
While securing the Patriot licensing is a win, he is aggressively seeking immediate, ready-to-deploy air defense to protect their power grid.
And interestingly, the Stylo briefs note he is promoting a flexible approach to eventual ceasefire negotiations.
Right, because he believes the deep strike campaign on Russian oil and logistics has finally given Ukraine the leverage required to negotiate from a position of strength rather than desperation.
Then there is Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, whose primary task is just managing the alliance's internal friction.
Which is no small task.
Right. Not at all. He is portraying the open disagreements over defense spending and strategy as a strength of democratic alliances, while heavily reinforcing the ultimate deterrent, which is the United States' nuclear umbrella.
We also have to look at the official stance from the Kremlin to get the full picture here.
Right. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov heavily criticized the Ankara summit.
Yeah, the Russian perspective frames the $40 billion anti-drone investments and the Patriot licensing as provocative militarization.
They essentially accuse NATO of crossing the line from supporting a proxy to covertly waging a direct war against the Russian Federation.
Which brings our conversation to a critical friction point.
The cost.
Yes, the immense cost of this new defense posture. The sheer scale of these commitments, rebuilding supply chains, financing multi-year drone shields, sustaining the Ukrainian state, it's colliding with a fragile economic reality across the continent.
The economic foundation of Europe is showing severe stress fractures right now.
We're seeing the European Union tightening public procurement markets, essentially walling off access to foreign companies deemed security risks.
And they are also accelerating the rollout of a digital euro, aiming for retail availability by 2029.
Which is a huge structural shift. Why the rush on the digital euro?
Because the digital euro is essentially an economic bunker. The EU recognizes that financial systems can be weaponized. By creating a sovereign digital currency, they are attempting to insulate the European economy from foreign manipulation.
Trying to reduce reliance on external financial infrastructure in a fractured world.
Exactly. But the most visceral economic shockwave is hitting Germany right now.
Yeah, the situation with Volkswagen. Yeah. They're proposing up to 100,000 global job cuts, with massive factory closures slated for Germany itself.
It's unprecedented for them. You have labor unions protesting and huge uncertainty in industrial hubs like Hanover and Zwickau.
And you really cannot separate a factory closing in Hanover from the conflict in Ukraine.
No, they are directly linked. The traditional model of German heavy industry relied heavily on cheap, abundant pipeline gas from Russia.
Right. And when that energy bridge collapsed, the cost of manufacturing just skyrocketed.
The geopolitical crisis directly catalyzed an industrial crisis, making large sectors of European manufacturing globally uncompetitive.
And that level of economic pain breeds immediate political volatility.
Everywhere you look.
Yeah. In the U.S., the midterms are showing signs of deep unpredictability, highlighted by a sudden Senate race suspension in Maine due to a scandal.
And in the UK, the Labour Party is in the middle of a leadership race featuring veteran politician Andy Burnham, which could completely pivot the UK's domestic and defense priorities.
So when you run this combination of factors, the cost of war, the fear of escalation, the loss of jobs, through the Stylo AI sentiment analysis of global social media, the polarization is just stark.
It really is. The data reveals a deeply fractured public.
What are the main camps looking like?
Well, while a segment of users strongly supports NATO's resilience and the necessity of rearming against Russian aggression, there is a rapidly deepening well of anti-war dissent.
People are getting exhausted.
Yeah, the algorithm highlights a growing, palpable fear among everyday users that a wider direct war in Europe is just inevitable by 2026 or 2027.
And the frustration driving that dissent is largely economic, right?
Exactly. Users are looking at massive, multi-billion-dollar defense budgets and watching their own domestic welfare programs, healthcare, and infrastructure get sidelined.
People are angry that their taxes are funding anti-drone shields while their local factories are closing down.
And this environment is highly susceptible to targeted narratives. The Stylo data shows pro-Russian viewpoints, often echoing outlets like is.ru, gaining significant traction.
What's the core argument that's resonating there?
The core argument finding an audience is that the European Union is basically engaged in self-harm, that its energy embargoes and sanctions are devastating its own working class without actually altering the battlefield in Ukraine.
And when people are already worried about inflation and job security, that narrative finds a very receptive audience.
It does. It preys on very real anxieties.
So taking all this intelligence into account, what are the specific indicators you should be watching for in the coming weeks?
First, monitor the rear area support zones, specifically the logistics corridors in Poland and the Baltics.
What's the key metric there?
Watch whether Russian hybrids, sabotage, the cyber intrusions, the rail disruptions. Watch if it escalates from being an ambient nuisance to causing critical structural damage to the supply chain.
Okay, that makes sense. And second,
Pay close attention to diplomatic back channels. With the Ankara summit concluded, look for signs of indirect, quiet negotiations between Trump, Zelensky, and Putin, particularly regarding that 2-month negotiation window mentioned in recent intelligence intercepts.
because every single piece of this, the deep strikes, the GPS jamming, the factory closures, the debates in Ankara, it is all part of the same massive equation.
It's all connected.
Yeah. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that completely shifts how we view this landscape.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, we've been discussing how AI tools like Stylo are used to track global data, predict supply chain collapses, and map out these gray zone provocations.
Right.
But if artificial intelligence can analyze millions of data points to identify a vulnerable rail line or a blind spot in a radar net, how long until these AI systems aren't just analyzing the hybrid war, but actively suggesting the targets?
Oh, wow. That is a chilling thought.
Right. Are we moving into an era of automated sub-threshold warfare, where algorithms are the ones deciding which logistics hub to jam to create the maximum political chaos?
The speed of decision-making in the gray zone is accelerating so fast. The tools of analysis eventually become the tools of execution.
And navigating a landscape moving that fast requires having your own analytical edge. That is exactly what Stylo News is built to provide.
Yeah, it's not just a standard news feed.
No, it is an application for your phone or desktop that lets you customize and curate your own personal intelligence-style briefs. It pulls from hundreds of traditional news sources and platforms like X.
And the underlying technology is what really makes it unique. It features multilingual intelligence, which instantly translates and cross-references foreign media.
Which is crucial right now.
Absolutely. And the Location AI bot allows you to run pattern-of-life analysis on specific geographic flashpoints to see trends before they ever hit the mainstream.
You can equip yourself with the exact same level of insight global leaders use. Subscribe today and get AI-powered news on demand at www.stylonews.com.
It's an incredible tool for making sense of all this.
It really is. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us for this deep dive. Navigating this volume of information isn't easy, but understanding it is essential.
Definitely. Please let us know what topics you want us to explore in the future.
Yes, send us your requests, and be sure to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms. Keep questioning the narratives you see and look past the front lines. Have a great day.